So, what is up, guys? Nick here, helping you to master your technology. And in this episode, we're going to take a look at the iPhone 16 Pro Max versus the iPhone 16 Pro size comparison in detail to help you decide which one is going to be the right size for you. Let's begin by talking about the length, the width, the height, stuff like that. So the iPhone 16 Pro Max is 6 millimeters wider than that of the 16 Pro. So what that means in practice is that if you buy the 16 Pro Max, the side to side reach is the widest ever on an iPhone. It's the biggest iPhone yet. Now, this one is still going to be quite practical and comfortable on the iPhone 16 Pro. As you can see there, there's a whole big amount right there. This is 71 millimeters wide. Now, it's 163 on the height here, so from top to bottom, and then it is about 149 on the iPhone 16 Pro. So you basically have a phone that's not only shorter, more petite, also much more comfortable. But at the same time, it's still bigger than a 6.1 or an older 5.8, or even way bigger than like a mini phone. So it has like this sweet spot kind of size for some people where it's going to be big, feel big, but it also doesn't feel like overly big. So this could be the perfect size for some, but there's a major trade-off with the size here. If you get the Max, or the Pro, you lose that battery size because of the size. It's able to fit in a larger battery. You'll see here, holding it though, there's a big gap there between the two. So the Max is going to be more uncomfortable to hold in pretty much all respects. Where this really comes into play, I find, is on the Max, when I'm using this phone in my pocket, especially if I put it in shorts pockets or something, this thing just feels huge in the pocket. Throw a case on it, it becomes even bigger. And it's not that I can't handle this. You know, I've all the Maxes I've had before, and this is still the one I'm choosing of the two because of the battery. I'm just saying, you really, really feel it. This one, I don't feel it so much, but I still feel it. It's still 199 grams, and this one is 227 grams. The titanium makes these much lighter than they would be if they didn't have titanium, though, so that's a good pro for both of them. On the thickness front, the cameras are actually the same exact cameras, so they stick off the body in the same fashion. But when you get the iPhone 16 Pro Max, your button for the power button is also raised a bit higher. So ergonomically, when reaching up to turn on the power, it's going to be shorter for the iPhone. It's going to be shorter for the iPhone 16 Pro than for the 16 Pro Max to trigger that button. Now, it's not going to be a big deal if you have big hands, but small hands, you might be like that. You know what I mean? And then over here on the left, it's the same thing. It's a little bit higher up, same as the action button, a little bit higher up. So that could be a little bit less practical depending on your hand size. It's not by much, but it's something if you have a smaller hand. All right, so if you take a closer look here, how they actually achieve this, we have a 6.7 inch on the left over there. That's the 15 Pro Max. This is the 16 Pro Max. How they achieved this size increase was they made it slightly taller, but stretched out the bezels to make those a little bit thinner. So what this lends to is a phone that feels a little bit wider, a little bit more spacious than the iPhone over here on the left, but it doesn't really give you much else other than that, but a little bit more uncomfortable. Now, you'll see as we scroll, you're not really displaying way more information on the iPhone 16 Pro Max, but it does allow it for a larger battery. But coming from a 6.7, I hope I'm illustrating that you're getting an even more bigger, slightly more uncomfortable phone, but you get better battery life because of that. So if you were handling a Plus model, 6.7, which would be like the 14 Plus or the iPhone 15 Plus, or you came from a Pro Max from the last 3 years, you can probably definitely handle the iPhone 16 Pro Max. Now, switching gears to the 16 Pro, is this size right for you? Well, let's take a look at it next to the 6.1 iPhone 16. You'll see the 16 not only is thinner, it's lighter. There's actually a little gap between the two. You don't get all the Pro features, but you'll see the bezels going around the body are barely noticeable to some, but definitely that's how they achieved the 6.3. I think there's this misconception that the iPhone 6.3 is actually in between, kind of like close to a 6.7 or 5. No, it's actually not really close at all. I would say the 6.3 is actually closer to that of the 6.1 with just a stretched screen. So with the bezels. All right, and here's the way you'll see what I'm talking about, how it's not close to the max size if you go with the Pro. And I'm not saying it's better, I'm just saying it's not max size. So you'll see this is also an area you might want to pick the max for. If you do a lot of media consumption, especially if you do like movie watching on your phone or long form content watching, I will say though that the iPhone 16 Pro Max is going to be a far better experience. I've been trying out the 16 Pro Max quite a bit, and I gotta say this phone is basically kind of like having a little mini tablet, the iPhone 16 Pro Max for watching video. Although the dynamic islands will protrude a little bit on display, you could see the differences there. So a lot more space over here, and because of the longer battery, the longer form content will be a better experience over here. But this is definitely enough size too for on the go. It's definitely a very good compact size. So that should illustrate how like media consumption would be, and you'll see that. One thing I always like about the Maxes though is because if we're going to have a dynamic island, the more screen size I have, the less I notice it. Anytime a screen is smaller, I see this more. It's just because there's just less space for my eye to be distracted. I see it. So I'm not saying it's a big deal. I'm just saying that this is a little bit less distracting on the larger display. So looking at both these phones from a reading perspective, you're going to see that in terms of the width, the iPhone 16 Pro Max has more width. As you can see, the lines just look a little bit wider, and also it's a little bit longer down, so you get much more content, about 3 sentences or so more on here. So this one stops where it says Sam, so it would be right here. And then to get that same content, you're going to have to keep scrolling. So there's more scrolling on the iPhone 16 Pro than there is for the iPhone 16 Pro Max. Now, if we scroll up here in Apple News, we're reading about some Samsung Galaxy stuff. You'll see not too much more displayed on the content pictures, but you're starting to see more content down here versus over here. I tend to not like a lot of scrolling. I think it causes distraction, so I prefer the 16 Pro Max for the ability to display more content when reading. So that's why I prefer this phone, because this leads to more scrolling in my experience. But it's not like so much. You can just lower the default size and kind of like make things smaller, and then it will show more, but then it becomes a little bit like you got to squint sometimes depending on, the size. If you go down too much, it's going to look way too tiny on the text size. So that's kind of like a good gist of the media experience you'll see right there. Let's have a look at the keyboard. Now the keyboard, man, it is just, wow. Look at this thing. Oh my, this is ridiculous to try to type with one hand on here. I know, they have this right here. They have this thing where you could just hold down, bring the keyboard over. Hey, but still, because of the width of the phone, it still feels awkward even doing this. So this to me is a two-hand. This is a two-hand iPhone all day. So you're going to be typing a lot with two hands. One thing I do like about the super wide keyboard on the iPhone 16 Pro Max is that it does make for less grammatical mistakes. But you could see their keyboard definitely smaller on the iPhone 16 Pro on the right. But what that leads to is this phone is a little bit easier. Well, I failed right there. A little bit easier to type with one hand. So I think much more people will be able to reach side to side on here. However, with a 6.3 and them stretching the bezels, this is also more uncomfortable than a 6.1. Let me show you that example. As you look right here and you see, because those bezels got stretched a little bit, the keyboard is further to the edge right there. So on the 13, this is an iPhone 13 right here, one of the most popular iPhones. You'll see, hey, this is a test. So my thumb can reach there versus coming a little bit further because there's a little bit more bezel here on this phone. So if you're coming from a 6.1, even coming to the 6.3, expect a little bit of a more uncomfortable one-handed experience. All right, so I want to show a couple more comparisons before we give you my final conclusion, and you'll see that the Max with the 6.9, this is the 6.5 Max from before. Now, I just want to showcase this quickly to the Pro, because the Pro is a 6.3, and you could see that the 6.3 is getting close to that of the older, like years ago, Maxes. So that is something to note, but it's definitely nothing like the 6.7s. Let's take a look at the iPhone 11. If you have an older iPhone 11 versus a 6.3, so you could see that thick bezel. And you could see, but overall, the actual body of these phones, it's like holding an iPhone 11 in the size. It's not too much different. It's just a little bit, but a much thinner bezel lends to a bigger screen experience while still having around that same size as something like an iPhone 11. And if you're coming, of course, from an iPhone 11 base, something like a 6.1 to this phone, that's a ginormous leap in screen space. So that's nice. One phone that we'll never see again probably is the mini product. I don't know if we'll ever see this again. But this one, I shouldn't say never because you never know. But you can see right here that the phone right here is much, much smaller than a 16 Pro. So don't even expect any one-handed abilities compared to something like a mini. This is the true one-hander right here that Apple made in the past several years, is the iPhone 13 mini. This is the true one-hander, not this thing. So I wanted to give you that size perspective so you could see that this is no small phone over here in the 16 Pro base model. Lastly, if you're coming from something like a big bezel iPhone SE, you'll see that this is going to be a lot in thickness and size upgrade for you if you come over from something like this. Huge size increase. And the SE is one of the most easy one-handed phone as well because of those bezels. You can easily reach up to the top. You can easily reach the bottom. Side to side is super easy with the thumb action. So this one is actually, and the home button is clicky. This is actually one of the most easy to use one-handed human phones out there with a flat screen. So even though this thing is dated looking, man, is it easy to use with one hand, and it's super thin and light. So I still appreciate this phone even though it's a dated looking product. So you've seen all the size comparisons, you've seen the media experience, the typing experience, the reading experience. I will say a lot of times I'm shifting from hand to hand in the iPhone 16 Pro Max because of its size. It gets a little bit uncomfortable sometimes. That is an experience I've been having with this. I will say that if you're a road warrior, you're going to use Apple Maps, GPS. You put this thing on your car, your car phone holder, whatever like that. Or if you're going you do a lot of bike riding, really long distance endurance or anything of that sort where you need the GPS and you need it to last a long time, this is a big screen GPS and it lasts a while. So this is the one I would pick. Also, if you're that type of person who is doing a lot of business on the go and you need a great camera, you need a long battery to get all the business done, you don't got time to get to a charger right away, you're going to want the long battery life, you're going to have to deal with the size. It's worth it for that type of experience. And if you're a gamer, you got more space to spread out and play your games. So this is better. Also more area to spread out the thermal management. In addition to that, longer battery life for longer gaming sessions. So that's good as well. Also, if you ever do decide to do some video editing, more space will make it more enjoyable to make your quick cuts on this phone. So I do have to say that the 16 Pro Max is the winner for those media heavy usages. Here's the phone for you, the iPhone 16 Pro. If you want to you're a very active individual. You don't want something weighing down your pockets. You want to throw this in a bag, something very light. You want to put this in your back pocket. This phone is more manageable. You want to put this on a bike holder for quick trips, and you don't want a super heavy phone on your bike looking all huge and stuff like that. This is also a great little phone for those of you who want better battery life than some of the older Pros, but you don't want that huge iPhone 16 Pro. Also, public transport, if you don't want people in your business, a smaller phone is easier to cup like this and kind of just keep it private. And lastly, camera is smaller and more portable to use. So yeah, and if your hand is smaller, this is just going to be better. It just doesn't have all those extras like the battery life and, the extra media space and stuff like that. So that's how I would choose. That's how I would choose which size is for you. I hope this helped you out to decide, and I hope by the end of this video, you finally figured out which is the size that's going to really suit you best. Let me know which ones you're going to pick in the size down below. Thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will catch you all in the next episode. Nick here. Be sure to be well, and peace.